Hello, and welcome to Stumble Upon. I'm Austin.
And I'm Emily. Today we're going to be discussing While You Were Sleeping, About a Boy, and Last Christmas.
As always, there'll be plenty of swearing and spoilers.
But if that doesn't scare you, then grab a bowl of popcorn, make some hot chocolate, and get ready to lie your ass off, because we're going to be discussing holiday movies. Austin, would you like to give us the synopsis for While You Were Sleeping?
Absolutely. A hopelessly romantic Chicago Transit Authority token collector is mistaken for the fiancé of a coma patient.
I love that synopsis.
I do too. It's fucking weird.
It's so good.
Okay. Emily, would you like to give us the synopsis for About a Boy?
Why, thank you for asking. I absolutely would. About a Boy is about a cynical, immature young man who is taught how to act like a grown-up by a little boy. Which feels really creepy as a synopsis. I'll be honest with you. I don't like that synopsis, but I didn't write it.
I kind of love the idea that you're like, I'm going to put you in a tie. I'm going to dress you. You're going to act like a grown up because little boys know how grown ups act.
I know, this is like a super creepy. It does give like weird vibes.
Yeah.
But cool. Anyway, Austin, would you like to give us a synopsis for Last Christmas?
Sure. Last Christmas. A hot mess of a woman meets a mysterious young man during the Christmas season who brings out the best in her. But is he too good to be true?
Bum, bum, bum.
He's not real.
Yeah, spoiler.
Spoiler,
he's a ghost.
Or maybe, like, this would be the shittiest spoiler. A hot mess of a young woman meets a mysterious man during the Christmas season who brings out the best in her. Is he actually her heart?
A woman who recently had a transplant discovers her heart is a ghost walking around as a beautiful man played by Henry Golding. Yeah. She falls in love with the heart in her chest and starts to ask her questions about how much self-love really means to her. Actually, that's a better synopsis. I win.
Last Christmas, an exploration of self-love.
Oh, but then they got to play
G.
the Annie Lennox song instead of all the George Michael. When I think about you.
The Annie song?
Annie Lennox.
Nope, not Annie Lennox.
Who sings that song?
The Divinals.
No.
Yes, it's the Divinals.
You're welcome, audience. It's not Annie Lennox.
Yeah.
What the hell?
At least you got the lyrics right.
That's something. And let's not lie. That doesn't happen very often,
No,
everybody.
It does not.
I am notorious for getting the lyrics wrong. Are you sure?
Yes, I am sure. I am 100% sure.
Damn it.
I would bet you
Oh, okay, yeah.
dinner for the rest of my life.
Well, we're not going to make a bet.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Sweet Dreams.
Yes.
Sweet dreams are made of these.
Much different song.
But I sang another song, which was appropriate to my story.
Yes.
And then I thought about Annie Lennox.
So thematically, you were correct in your story process, even if the subject matters and topics were wrong.
Welcome to Stumble Upon.
Emily Gallagher's exploration of songs she thought someone else wrote.
So here we go.
And here we go.
So today's kind of a big day for us. On the day we're recording this.
Right.
We released our official movie trailer for our feature film, Citywide. And that's pretty damn exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's in our show notes. So if you haven't seen it on our Instagram page, which is at Fishtown Films, definitely check out our trailer for the very first Zero Waste movie. And in case you don't know what Zero Waste is, a little background on that. Zero waste means we generated no trash for the landfill while creating this movie from the beginning to the very end. Took us about 3 years to make the movie. From writing it all the way through production and now in post-production. And that meant we generated a total of 16 ounces, one small pizza sauce jar worth of trash.
Yeah.
And what's exciting about that is that nobody else has attempted to do this yet. We are the very first. And we believe in living our values. So we made this movie, which is a super fun romantic thriller comedy called Citywide. We decided to make that zero waste and challenge ourselves on a whole new level. Okay, so check out our show notes and watch Citywide, the trailer, and stay tuned for the new year when the movie will be coming out.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated. So today's films we're going to take a little different tack than we have in the past. We're going to talk about all three of the films kind of all at once, intertwining kind of how we watched it, which was just we watched them all in a row and kind of have had a conversation ongoing about how these three Christmas films interact with each other or relate to each other in some way. Because I think that a lot of times when we do talk about films between us or when I talk with other people, it's kind of this conversation about how it relates to something else rather than just it in a vacuum. So we're going to try a little bit something different this time. So the films, like While You Were Sleeping, About a Boy, and Last Christmas, were made in three different eras. So While You're Sleeping is the 90s, About a Boy is the early aughts, and Last Christmas came out in 2019, I believe.
That is correct. And they all tackle the time around Christmas and New Year's in their own way.
Yeah.
And they all tackle family life in their own way and how one relates to family. And they all tackle love and loneliness. It's kind of a theme throughout all of them.
Yeah, all three protagonists of the films are single at the time that the film starts. And are, like, in a lot of ways, I would say that that society would look at them as not being fully successful people in the terms of family or life choices. They can be, like, the Hugh Grant's character is independently wealthy, but he is somebody who hasn't worked a day in his life. He does nothing, as he says over and over again, scaring romantic prospects away. Sandra Bullock in While You Were Sleeping is working at the
SEPTA, essentially? Or CTA, I guess, in Chicago.
Yeah. And is alone. Her parents have passed away. She has a small group of friends that seems to be mostly work-related and or apartment building related.
Location-based.
Yeah. And Emilia Clarke's character in Last Christmas is kind like...
a hot mess.
Is a hot mess. She seems personally estranged from her own family for various reasons. And is burning through the possibility of places to crash because she is, as Emily just said, a hot mess. So, like, starting from do you want to start kind of with the main characters and a little bit about them?
Let's do it.
Yeah. And I know that this is a film that you absolutely adore. Like,
I love this movie.
Like you in fact were kind of nervous to do it on the podcast because you were afraid that you were going to sort of disrespect it or disrespect your memory of it.
No, I just think it's really difficult sometimes to talk about movies that are kind of part of my core self because they're sort of part of my origin story. I don't remember a time where I didn't know and love this movie. I couldn't tell you when I first watched it. And so it's really sometimes difficult to talk about them from a critical perspective or even just kind of an academic perspective because it's just so me.
Yeah.
It's so part of myself. But I think doing it in the context that we're talking about today, where we're just talking about themes and exploring how these different decades are tackling these same issues, is really interesting. And so we're gonna see how it goes.
Yeah. So starting with While You Were Sleeping, like you say you've seen this film many times.
It is part of who I am.
And for myself, I was introduced to it by you a couple of years ago, and it started to become a consistent presence in our holiday Christmas movie watching. Yes. And I'll say that there are lots of this film that I really, really enjoy. And there's parts of it that don't really work for me. Like it kind of pacing wise or even like direction wise, it feels a little bit off. But for the most part, the most incredible thing about this film is like, this is Sandra Bullock right at the time where she is popping off as a star. Like this is in the era of practical magic and in the era of speed and becoming this incredibly, seemingly relatable movie star.
Yeah, she sort of defines herself, or she is defined by the movie industry as the ultimate girl next door. Like the somehow this incredibly stunning and ridiculously talented human,
charming as fuck,
totally attainable for everyone.
Yeah,
which makes no sense.
Right,
but that's how it was presented, and it kind of. I think about this film And I think I love it so much in part because it informed so much of my understanding of who like I could be as a grown-up woman. It's way too heteronormative for my tastes and for who I am as an identity. But you go back to that 90s, like big, chunky, ridiculously huge sweaters and her big, chunky boots. And just like the idea, not just they present it as her being comfortable and her style as being really organic. And we'll discuss style and costuming in a bit. But it actually, no, we're going to jump in right now and talk about costuming now. Why are we going to wait?
Yeah.
Like,
you're going to tease.
No, let's just jump in.
Yeah.
Costuming. Okay, so her costume, her big, huge wool, organic type of sweaters, like these are natural materials. Her huge, chunky ass kicking boots. Her coat that was her father's that she wears. It's too big on her.
Yeah.
There's all these elements of like her past and her like you kind of wonder if some of the sweaters are her dad's too, maybe. That's what they're going with. And it's so interesting when you compare with who she falls in love with the Bill Pullman character. Childhood crush. But both of them. but what's interesting is like you see, we were talking about this earlier, that he is also wearing like flannel and denim, and there's these really like man of the earth.
His reversible jacket.
His reversible jeans jacket.
His actually reversible jacket.
He wears it both ways. And it's the only jacket he wears. It's so great. I love it.
And there's something about that even that I'd love to continue this, but I'd like to point out like this film, as well as both About a Boy and Last Christmas, their stakes are relatively low.
Yes.
Like, it's not change the world type of shit. It's like, I would like to go to Florence. Like, that's an achievable goal in life. Like, that's like, those stakes are not something that we typically have in a lot of films now. Like, still romantic comedies.
Or even look at Speed, the next movie she does.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to blow up
Yeah.
if you stop driving the bus this fast.
Right. So it's like having these characters who look and kind of present as average or middle class or lower middle class even. Like, and having them be the primary heroes of the film is pretty exceptional for even to look at now. Like, About a Boy's slightly different because he's rich.
He's so rich. But he's also looked down on.
Yes, but we can get into that.
We'll get into
like,
that next.
Like, his stylings is still not glamorous. He's not wandering around as if he's in Crazy Rich Asians or something of that ilk. Like, there's still something very...
It's not obscene.
Yeah, there's something achievable in all the stylings that everybody in the three films have, which I find really charming and really endearing because they feel... in costuming, very relatable or somebody that you could actually meet. You're not like, it doesn't feel like they're going to show up in a Bentley and be like, well, how the fuck am I going to know this person? I don't understand what a Bentley really is.
Well, and that is interesting to bring up because if you think about Peter Gallagher's character, who has the greatest eyebrows of all time and a wonderful last name.
Yeah.
Big fan of his name.
Yeah.
I mean, it just rolls off the tongue. Gallagher, you love it.
Yeah. It would be better if it was Gallagher.
Gallagher works too.
Yeah.
As we learned.
Yes.
From being in Ireland. Nobody liked the way I pronounced my name. I was like, wait, okay, I will listen to you.
I guess I'm the one who's wrong.
I'm wrong.
Okay.
And we probably were.
Probably.
But Peter Gallagher's character is incredibly wealthy. He has a ridiculously huge apartment. He seems like he's still stuck in the 80s in a bunch of his costuming as his amazing girlfriend, Ashley Bartlett Bacon.
Yep.
But there's just something really interesting about how through costuming we are the costumer is tipping the hat, the filmmaker's tipping the hat to the audience that Peter Gallagher's character isn't correct for Sandra Bullock because of her clothing. Like what she does is she matches, like beautifully, seamlessly matches with Bill Pullman's character. And that is, and I knew you could argue, oh, are they saying that classism? They in fact do discuss that.
Yeah.
Like that she's not classy enough to be his girlfriend. And that's certainly how she interprets what Bill Pullman's character is saying. And you could argue that's an argument within the costuming where like he keep people separate that don't belong together.
Right.
But it's also an interesting way of being like, no, look how organically they do blend.
Right. It's interesting that the film is willing to talk about class here because Because what it does by doing that is present options for viewing the characters outside of just how they're presenting to us. We get to look at them outside of themselves. And I think the film very, very clearly comes down on this idea that the rich class are a bunch of fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Because like Ali Walker's character, the Ashley Bartlett Bacon.
Ashley Bartlett Bacon.
Yeah, comes in when she comes in wearing her fancy clothes and having her nose that he paid for and her boobs that he paid for, him being Peter Gallagher, like is also presented kind of terribly in the same way that Peter is presented terribly, or Peter Gallagher's character is presented terribly. It's a fascinating kind of, like, again, similarity. Both of these people are awful people, so they deserve to be together. Bill Pullman and Sandra Bullock are nice people, so they should be together. And if you take that to the class structure, you're almost saying that the working class is really nice and the higher class is full of fucking idiots, which maybe it's
Broad strokes.
Yeah,
it's broad strokes.
But it's,
that's what is being applied.
Yeah,
by the film.
Most definitely. And Ashley Bartlett Bacon's husband, who shows up, is equally chaotic and destructive in his brief moment.
Also, all of them have this super 80s vibe to them, which I loved. I loved it.
I truly look at them and I think none of them would be out of place in Alan Rickman's gang in Die Hard. Like, they all could have been members of his villainous gang. All three of those characters could have been just gun-toting lunatics in Die Hard.
Oh my God. Now you have just created a master film. Die Hard while you were sleeping.
Yeah.
This is amazing. And we're going to make it. We're going to recreate it with whoever's left over. I'm sorry, Alan Rickman. But it is interesting to think about what is this film admiring and what is it kind of shaming?
Yeah.
And how it is true for all three films.
And that's a fascinating thing that you're bringing up just in that, because of Joey Jr.
Yeah.
Like, thinking about what it's valuing, what it's shaming. Because Joey Jr. is a very fascinating character to me. He's the apartment mate. Like, he lives in the same apartment building as Sandra Bullock's character.
His uncle owns the building.
Right.
Or is the manager or landlord or something.
Yeah. He has some power, I guess. But Joey Jr. is a buffoon. But he's a lovable, kind buffoon. He's not a creep. And yet he does some things that, like, in the film you could easily shame him for. Like, there's a moment where he's shoved into a closet by Sandra Bullock to have confusion not take place when Bill Pullman's character shows up at her house. And when she opens the closet door after Bill Pullman leaves, he's trying on her shoes. And it is played for a joke, but it's not played to shame him.
No, which is really important, especially in the 90s when people were queer shaming across the boards.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating moment, this just beat.
Which was brought back at the end when he's upset about his girlfriend who just broke up with him, and she brings him into the apartment and she's like, "Do you want to try on my shoes?" And he's like, "Yeah." And you're like, "That's yes, thank you."
Yeah, and while you can laugh at the moment, and probably did have a bunch of laughs in the theater over that, it's not played as if he's a terrible person because he wants to do it. She's playing it out of empathy and kindness to him.
Yeah, which is a very early adopter in that kind of language on such a mainstream stage. You know, I think it was really encouraging to have such a manly man being emotionally available, having an emotional IQ, wanting to talk, being open with exploring his queerness. Whatever, we don't know where he's going from here. He might not know yet. We know he just came out of prison. So we know that he's had a rough life and he's trying to define himself. He does really sweet things for her all the time, and it definitely could vibe as creep. I think that they were sort of trying to do that, but I think the actor did such a good job and brought so much to the table that it immediately became empathetic.
I would say that in different hands and a different attitude played towards this, he could be an incredible sociopathic creep. He could be, it could be a scene out of like the Toolbox Murders where you're just like, this is fucking horrifying. Like, this is not great. But as played in this film and presented in this film, you're like, oh, these people actually care for Joey Jr. Joey Jr. is not to be just laughed at. He is not the court jester. He might do buffoonery, but he's not like, he is an empathetic human being, even when you're going, well, you're kind of doing things that are a tiny bit shady.
Well, and I feel like he's just honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's lying about dating her.
Yeah.
He's trying to present. He's what are you reaching?
He's aspirational.
He's aspirational.
He's trying to live. What is it? The promise, the dream, the
secret.
The secret. He's trying to live the secret. He's like, if I say that I'm dating Sandy Bullock, I'm going to be dating her.
Yeah, that's like, don't lie to people about who you're dating.
Yep.
Lesson. But other than that, he is bringing her flowers. He's getting tickets to shows to take her. But when she's like, for sure, no, he moves on.
Yeah.
And he's dating somebody else.
Yep.
And then they become friends.
Yes.
And I think that's really, I love Joey Jr. I think he's just so funny and so sweet. And like that whole scene where he's paying attention to Bill Pullman, like leaning.
And that whole conversation, like the leaning conversation, is really fucking great.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
But it's also funny because, he's not like coming and interrupting.
Yeah.
He's not getting in between them physically. He's just like, hey, you okay?
Yeah.
You okay? Okay.
Yeah. He's actually presenting a clear language to how you can communicate with somebody that you like, but you realize isn't going to be that person for you. Like, you can still have a relationship, a platonic and caring relationship, without it becoming something else. And there's something really nice and genuine about how they go about telling that. Like, they do that with every single character in the film.
Yeah.
Like, every single side character, which is something that I think that all three of these films do an exceptional job with, is building out the roster of characters that are around the main characters that are incredibly wonderfully fulfilled. The family that Sandra Bullock's character is interested in getting involved with is just an exceptionally beautiful rendering of what you hope from a family that sounds like they could be incredibly toxic would be.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, the family is a core reason why I love this movie. I come from a very large family. We are Irish, Polish Catholics. I know it surprises you to hear that Emily Gallagher is Irish Catholic. And it's but the insanity of the dinners, the crazy around the holidays, the constant conversations with everyone, the interjecting. Oh my gosh, the church scene is like straight out of my family. Oh my gosh, so many, just talking through church and interrupting and people getting mad around you and you being like, what is your problem? And the grandma being like, I wish it was in Latin so we didn't have to understand it. I mean, that's my grandma for you. So it's just, I have such a big space in my heart for the family because they are just so incredible and really authentic.
Yeah.
In their drawing. Like how they were structured and written feels super authentic.
Yeah. And it's fascinating how, to me, like, it's fascinating how that film dovetails then with About a Boy's Family, because About a Boy starts off with two narrations, one about being alone and wanting it to be that way, and the other about needing to build something greater than yourself. And that at the core of About a Boy, there's this discussion of how do you build your own family? How do you build it with strangers, with people that you're bringing into your life? Like, do you need that? And it is something that Sandra Bullock's character is looking for in While You Were Sleeping, because she's lost all of hers. And to view that film in concert with About a Boy is really fascinating to me, because he doesn't want to. The Hugh Grant character in About a Boy has no interest in bringing anybody in. Like, just
because he's been burned.
Yeah.
He's been burned by his family, his origin family.
Yeah.
And so he's like, fine, I don't need it. And as being independently wealthy, he doesn't have to. And so his journey, because of Nicholas Holt's character, his journey to discovering that he actually does want to create his own family is really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I don't know, really important to tell. It's interesting that you go from the 90s wanting to get into an origin family to the 2000s being like, no, construct your own.
Yeah, like
you don't have to worry about it.
Like the ideal for the film or the happy ending for the end of While You Were Sleeping is we got married, he took me to Florence. The ideal ending for About a Boy is you're still an island, but you need to have an island chain. Like that you're still an individual, but you need other individuals around you to help. And then by the time we get to Last Christmas, like the actual the ending that I feel about Last Christmas is she has to accept herself as a person and accept who she is and all the things that have built up to create her as who she is.
Who she's become.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Who she's become. And that's what the film is about. And so we've gone from like the 90s being a film about joining somebody, the aughts being a film about having other people, and then the teens being, well, I'm okay with myself. I have to be okay with myself.
Like grieving your past self and accepting your now self.
Yeah. And that's like, it's an exceptional arc of therapy, basically, of accepting the problems that are presented in your life and who you are and how they create you to the point that you need to be fine with who you are rather than saying, I can fix this by having somebody else in my life.
I can just add on, I can get married, I can fix my problem if I just bring more people in. And you're like, well, first you got to fix you.
And that's a fascinating conversation that actually happens in About a Boy. The Toni Collette character, who is fucking phenomenal. And let me just say this.
So good.
When I first saw this film, back in 2002 or 2003, whenever it came out, I looked at Toni Collette's outfits and was like, wow, those are strange. And now I'm like, wow, I really love her outfits.
I know her outfits are amazing. We're like, she's so Philly.
Yep. Like I have come around and I have been proven wrong. And
she was right.
She was right. And the costumer was right. Those outfits are fucking cool.
They're great.
But like I love her conversations, and her growth in the film mirrors, like the film does an exceptional job mirroring the growth of everybody in it. Like how Hugh Grant's character grows, how Toni Collette's character grows, how Nicholas Holt's character grows. They all grow at the same rate and are like, while they're not coming to the same answer for each person, it's not so uniform that everybody agrees on everything. The idea that you have to start taking care of yourself, but those that are around you are affected by it is such a wonderful conversation to be having in a film.
It is. And how not only you have to take care of yourself and how that affects people, but by taking care of yourself, you can affect people. And so it's both. You have to use the resources you have so you can strengthen yourself to be able to better care for other people as well as you.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And I do like that the evolution from that is you got to take care of you. Like the whole film of Last Christmas is you got to get right with yourself and who you are now and be okay with you so that you can become your best self.
Yeah.
In whatever way that is. Like it doesn't have to be whatever parameters you thought you had to have, but recreate those parameters.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
So I think I would be interested in hearing some of your thoughts about the character representation in About a Boy, which is also a very heteronormative film. In fact, all three of these are very heteronormative.
Oh, yeah.
And it wouldn't
really
hurt.
cis.
It wouldn't hurt to have some more representation in any of these films, but like we can't do shit about that right now.
So white.
Yes. Yeah.
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 This is,
for the majority.
It is.
Like,
just true.
And while Last Christmas does an interesting job of bringing in Brexit and immigration concerns into the structural stress of the characters involved, like Last Christmas does like a really good job actually having Henry Golding and Michelle Yeoh and having some representation in the film, and that's actually quite lovely and not really even outside of Emilia Clarke's character being surprised that her boss's character is not actually named Christmas.
Santa.
That actually named Santa. Like there's some really there is some really lovely moments in that film that like I'll just jump back and say that there's actually good representation in that film comparatively.
Oh yeah, definitely compared. I also really like that Michelle Yeoh's character changes her name depending on where she's working.
Yep.
And I really like that
Kitty.
idea, Kitty, when she works at the
pet store
or the rescue.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I want to start changing my name depending on what I do.
Yeah.
But I keep doing the same thing, and I don't know like how that would work. So I have to think on that.
You just have to change your name randomly to different jobs that you're on. So like DP.
Right. So it's not
That's
fun.
kind of weird.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
I got to come up with cooler names.
Yeah.
We digress.
Out of the three films, About a Boy is the least Christmassy. Like the thing that ties it to Christmas for me is the fact that Hugh Grant's character's father wrote a Christmas song that everybody knows.
And it ends on Christmas Day.
Right. But it's like, but the reality of the film, it doesn't really take place on Christmas. It just happens into it. But I think that one thing that draws me to the fact of it being a Christmas film is that it's about coming together as a group of people and accepting all of the flaws that are in your groups, that are in your family structures. And I think that's like, I think it does a really interesting job having an open conversation about all of the flaws. Like Hugh Grant's character is a piece of shit, like in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like he lies to women to sleep with them.
Yeah.
That is a piece of shit move. Like he starts to become a better person, and people allow him to evolve and see him empathetically. And I think that that's really what the acceptance of people being multiples of themselves or multitudes of having is something that fascinates me about about a boy in general, because like Toni Collette's character, she tries to kill herself at the time that she gives her son to somebody else to watch. That's also a piece of shit move.
And then to commit to have an attempt at suicide in your home where your child would come home and find you. I mean, it doesn't mean you're a piece of shit. It means you are so profoundly lost and sad.
And that you leave a note and then you don't get it before he comes back, or you don't tell anybody where it is to grab it. Like they're all
to find it.
Yeah, it's all like the amount of tragedy that film actually like invests narrative space to, and yet is still really, really charming and endearing. And you could say, oh well, they're not doing it justice, but I think that like that's kind of it. Like you do justice to tragedy by existing within the whole realm of it. Like tragedy is not just sad. Tragedy is the sad parts of funny that still seep in. Like the fact that like there's a great scene when Will is confronted, the Hugh Grant's character is confronted by one of the girls that he tried to sleep with, and she yells at him and about it, and rightfully does so. And then Toni Collette is there, and she gets upset at her son for trying to defend Hugh Grant, and then Hugh Grant diffuses it by yelling about her son, about the Nicholas Hoult character killing a duck with her loaf of bread. And it's a kind of a wonderful encapsulation of this whole thing of like, there's so much going on. There are so many threads happening in that scene. There's Nicholas Holt's, the young boy's budding mentorship and friendship with Hugh Grant. There's the mother's struggle with who she is in relationship to both of those characters, who she is in relationship to her son, and then her friend showing up who has a completely different relationship to all of this. And there are multitudes of things happening in that scene, and it's still diffused by the fact that the son killed a duck with a heavy loaf of bread. And it's just like, it's a lovely representation, I think, of what the film is trying to do, which is show that there's a lot of things that happen in a person's life that can be explained in different ways all at the same time.
I also would say what's cool about it, and what I find interesting about it, is that it's flawed. So Toni Collette's character doesn't handle her suicide attempt necessarily very well with her child. She's a bit dismissive of him in finding the note and being like, well, I didn't think I was going to have to worry about explaining to you the note. So that I was going to die. And you're like, whoa, okay, nice trauma that you just gave him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you already gave him a bunch, but thanks for adding that on.
Yeah.
But that's true. Like you aren't going to be, if you're committing suicide, if you're this depressed, this sad, this in this much trouble, you're not going to be necessarily nailing it all the time.
Right.
And I think when you're happy and you're super healthy and you have all the resources in the world, you're still not nailing it every time.
Right.
I think we're so messy as humans, and I do appreciate that at least 2 of these films, About a Boy and Last Christmas, are leaning into the messiness of life, and that you can fuck. I mean, yes, all 3, because the whole purpose of While You're Sleeping is that she screws up by lying about that she's not dating this man in a coma.
Not engaged to.
She's not. No.
Yeah.
She is not engaged to the man in a coma. We're just going to pretend it is true. So you're right. We're messy in everything.
Yeah. And it's interesting in About a Boy also because she, like, the Toni Collette character, the scene that you're describing is wonderfully paralleled later when Hugh Grant meets Rachel Weisz, who I will also say, Rachel Weisz somehow manages to just like get out of the early aughts terrible clothing thing. And I know what I said about Toni Collette, but generally the clothing in the early aughts was fucking awful.
It was rough for us ladies.
The low-rise jeans are just fucking the worst. They hit no one well. They are the most offensive thing that has happened.
90s and aught fashion for women was profoundly bad.
Yeah.
And we were so stuck in these horrible clothes that were not designed for women's bodies.
Yeah. And
they were like, forget about your hips, forget about your boobs. We're not going to account for them in any of the clothing.
Yeah. And all the other clothing for all the other women in About a Boy is rough. Like, it's not great. And somehow, like, I imagine somewhere in a writer, Rachel Weisz was like, no terrible clothing, must be classic. I must look like I could also exist in a 1940s film. I'm just going to have beautiful gowns. Imagine Edith Head did this for me, or fuck off.
Oh, God bless.
Yeah.
I hope that is what her writer always says. She's just ageless and timeless and beautiful and never ages.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. But that scene where when Hugh Grant finally breaks it to her that he doesn't actually have a boy. He's not the boy's father. He's something else. And that he let her, like, she just assumed. So it was her fault. Like, how he handles that so terribly is exceptional. Like, and it's like, it allows him to fail and allows her to be kind of in charge of the scene by letting him fail over and over again. And the scene also does a really interesting thing, which is by the end of it, it doesn't feel like the door is completely closed on their relationship. It feels like he fucked up and he knows it and he needs to go away and figure out what the fuck is going on with his life. And she has a lot of thoughts to have about this motherfucker if he ever shows back up. But it leaves the door slightly ajar, which allows for the last scene of the film when they're all back together to not feel tacked on. And I'll say that is an exceptional job of writing and directing and performance and all of that through every aspect of the film to allow a scene that is that awkward and that horrible for one character, for what they're admitting and how they're handling it, to be able to recover within the same film and not have a ton of like, oh, well, that kind of just felt tacked on shit. Like, when she sees him again at the boys' recital where he terribly sings Killing Me Softly, and then Hugh Grant's character sings it even worse, is all you need. He needs that humility, that moment of humility, that moment of messiness.
I love bringing up that scene because talking about messiness, talking about not nailing it, right before Nicholas Holt's character goes on to perform that song with, well, what was going to be a recorder accompaniment, which would have been epic.
Yep.
He's trying to convince him not to do it.
Yeah.
This is suicide. Don't go out there. And he even says that to him, which is, of course, not great because his mother. Yeah. And why he's doing it is trying to make his mom happy. So all these reasons.
Yeah.
His character is is doing a really bad job of being supportive. And he fails at it.
Yeah.
And he makes the kid feel even worse. And the kid still goes out to do it. And it's only in his action following that of stepping on stage with the guitar, being his support. It's so beautiful to show you can fuck up, keep trying.
Yeah.
Keep trying to repair
Yeah.
what you fucked up.
And you phrase it really well there, because I think the film gives you reasons for this person to do something, reasons why they're wrong, reasons why they're going to try to get better at what they're doing. And all of those reasons play out, and it's a rare film that I find that uses narration really well to lay out the reasons that the scenes that are around those narrations can flesh out, so that we can start seeing how things are perpendicular to each other, that like this butts up against this, so we have to have some sort of resolution or conflict, or we have to understand the reason for it, and they're going to try to explain it in real time. And that feels really genuine with all of this. And it feels like the film is as much about listening to the person who you're talking to and taking into account for yourself what they're asking, and letting that be on both sides. Be like, okay, so this is where you think, like, all the conversations that Hugh Grant has with Nicholas Hoult are two-sided conversations. And you could argue that, well, it's really adult that the kid is talking like that, but who gives a fuck? You're constructing a movie. So, like, if you're going to construct the movie and have a movie about how you build a family, you're going to have pieces of what a family is. You're going to have somebody who represents a parent, somebody who represents a child, like, and have a conversation about what those things mean to each other and what reasons they bring to that. And I think the film does a really exceptional job presenting all those reasons and letting them fail when they're trying to prove that they're right, and then realize that they're wrong. And while I don't love the fact that Toni Collette offers her son at the end McDonald's as a prize, because it's not.
No. But she doesn't think so either.
Right. But she like, he had asked for McDonald's earlier. And so she's heard him. She's responding to something he wanted in a kind way, in an open way, in a generous, communicative way, not as just like, well, you did this, so let's go get McDonald's. There's something really pleasant about how they're communicating about what he wants moving forward.
Right, which is sort of to fit in, to be part of the community, and she's trying to help him become an individual.
Yep.
But in order to become an individual, you kind of need to understand the rules on some level. To break the rules, you got to know what they are.
Yeah.
And so he's still trying to navigate what those rules are, how to blend, how to have friends. And it does really fit in, but he creates a friend group.
Yes.
He finds his people once he's allowed to participate in it in his own way.
Yeah.
Which is only through the blending of both his mother and Hugh Grant's character.
Yeah.
And what you said earlier, the relationship with Hugh Grant and Nicholas Hoult is a lovely evolution. Like, you get to see it build. You get to see them start off antagonistic. You get to see how kind of Hugh Grant's character wins over Nicholas Hoult without even wanting to.
Yep.
He's just sort of stuck there, and the kid's just stuck, and he needs some help. And so you just see that, like, I'm just going to keep coming back. I'm going to keep coming back in the kid way.
Yeah.
As we know, like, everybody says kids are resilient. They're not. They're just trying to survive. And they're going to get their eye on the prize and figure out what is going to help them survive.
Yeah. They're determined to survive.
And they're, whew.
Yeah.
I love his I love his character. I love their relationship.
And one last thing before we jump over to Last Christmas that I want to discuss is the actual exceptional scene in which Toni Collette confronts Hugh Grant at dinner.
I love this scene.
And the moment that they afford, that they give to Nicholas Holt's character of saying, I'm hearing them argue, and I know that Will is right, my mom is wrong, and I'm basically I'm confused by that. It didn't make sense, and it's so lovely that they present that, not to prove that Will is right, but to show how smart the kid is. Like, that he recognizes his place in this argument, and that the conversation that happens, that Toni Collette basically is coming to this restaurant to tell Hugh Grant that he's a pedophile and to confront him about it, doesn't end with that. It ends with Toni Collette hearing him and being like, okay, so you understand my son more. Tell me what I'm missing.
Right.
And she does it very confrontationally, and then they have a conversation.
Yeah.
And they listen to each other, and it's fucking exceptional.
Yeah.
Like it might.
She sits her ass down and she's like, fine.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
But she does mean it. She's
Yeah.
not there to just be like, screw you. So you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. She's like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah. Like I really. Yeah, go ahead.
And to have it in that moment when he's out with one of his best friends who's been berating him this entire film for being a disaster and a failure because he doesn't have a family, because he doesn't have a career, because he doesn't have a girlfriend.
Yep.
Like the idea that Will is a failure because he's single and child free and wealthy.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
But I understand what she's saying because he isn't fulfilling. She sees him as having a lot of potential.
Yeah.
But it's her potential,
Yeah.
not what his reality is.
And you make a really great point with that, because the film is about fulfilling your own potential, not what somebody else's potential is of you or their belief. Like even if like he becomes even if he's like the surrogate father to Nicholas Hoult, it's not that he's fulfilled their potential. He's finding his own.
Yeah. He doesn't want to be the godparent to her daughter, Imogene. He's like, no, I don't want to do it. And he says some nasty things.
Yeah.
But he's honest about it. He's like, this is not a good choice.
Yeah.
You think this is a great choice. You think this is going to fix me. You think
Yeah.
you're not going to change me. I am not this person you keep pretending I am. And it's only when he chooses, when he chooses for himself who he wants,
Yep.
then he can be a good mentor, a good friend,
Yeah.
a good boyfriend, a good whatever, family member. Because in that final scene, his quote best friend and her family are not at that family dinner.
Yeah.
They're not there.
No.
It's Rachel Weisz, it's Toni Collette, it's Nicholas Hoult,
It's-
it's the guy from Amnesty International, I think.
Yep.
That he sets her up on a date.
And it's Rachel Weisz's kid, who's fucking amazing.
That kid is so good.
He's so adorable when he wants to threaten to murder Nicholas Hoult.
He's so cute. He does such a good job. He's so aggressive, but he does such a great job with that character, especially when you balance it with Rachel Weisz.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he really is.
Oh, I love that kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great scene. I love that scene. It's essential. It's an
Yeah.
essential element to that film, and I love that it always happens in the same restaurant.
And what's interesting about a boy versus not versus in comparison of like better or worse, but just like in comparison to While You're Sleeping is About a Boy is about making choices and the ramifications of that, active choices. She makes one choice, which is to lie, and then she tries to hide that lie for a really long time. So it's almost like the choice is an avoidance of choice, which if it weren't for how fucking charming she and Bill Pullman are, I'm not sure if that film works as well, because they become almost non-characters because they're not making choices. They're trying to, like, Bill Pullman's trying to figure out what the fuck is going on.
Right, he's onto her.
But she's just diverting. Whereas in About a Boy, and maybe I'm being too harsh on this, but whereas in About a Boy, they're constantly making choices, and they're constantly making bad choices.
Yeah.
And they're being called out upon it. And so these bad choices allow for a natural growth of character for all of them. Whereas in While You Were Sleeping, I almost say that nobody grows as a character at all.
No, nobody grows as a character.
Like there's nothing like
Not even Saul.
Yeah, they're not different. Like they're not substantially different from where they started. Not in a massive way. She gets exactly what she wants, whereas Hugh Grant gets nothing that he wants based on what his beginning statement is.
To be alone.
Yeah, he gets the reverse of what he was looking for, and Sandra Bullock gets exactly what she was looking for. But I think that we know more about Hugh Grant's character Will by the end than we do about Sandra Bullock's.
And I think that that's really interesting to wonder or to or reflect upon. Are we seeing ideals of the decade that they're made in? Is the ideal of the 90s like you find your man, find your family, and everything will be good?
Yeah, everything
You'll
else
get
will
everything you want.
Yeah, everything else will sort
That's
itself out.
all you have to worry about.
Yeah.
And in About a Boy, they're like, you see the struggle that he's had for his life, and his final decision is, yes, I'm going to build this family. I'm going to construct a bunch of like orphans, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And we will all collectively come together and create this family unit as we define it, as we want it. And that's the ideal for the aughts.
Yeah.
And then we go into the 2020s. And
Yeah.
the ideal is to find yourself,
Yeah.
as we discussed earlier.
And getting into Last Christmas, it's obviously, as we've already said, spoilers like everywhere. So like,
By the way, we're till the end of everything.
Yeah, so
just want to let you know, 40 minutes in.
but like, also specifically here, like the fact that she's like having a conversation with her heart, literally having a conversation with her heart throughout the entirety of the film. Like her heart is telling her where to go. It's trying to place her in a place to succeed, and she's actively chasing her heart around London, which is an incredibly wonderful metaphor.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a fucking lovely like thought. But it is a thought of an individual. It's not the thought of a group or being part of a group. It can lead you to other people, because like the fantasy of Last Christmas, the biggest fantasy, and I take into account the fact that like she's talking to a ghost, is that at the end of the film, her domineering mother, her depressed father, her in the closet sister, and her sister's girlfriend would all be celebrating happily at a homeless shelter for an event she put on. It's not just like, let me be clear. There's a reason to celebrate that.
Yeah.
And like,
it's beautiful.
Like there's an absolute reason to celebrate that. But those characters, based on what we've seen moving throughout the film, I don't necessarily believe that they would be celebrating that moment together. But it is a wonderful representation of the fantasy of her heart making her whole.
Yeah.
Like, and that her heart making her whole has helped heal everyone around her, which is fucking lovely. So let's talk a little bit about the ghost, about her heart. Because I think
Henry Golding.
Yeah, I think both of us kind of feel that he represents this kind of manic pixie dream boy.
Yeah. He's stunning. I mean, ridiculously beautiful.
He rides a bike.
He rides a bike eloquently.
Yeah.
But if you could ride a bike eloquently,
Yes.
which is not possible, he does.
He rides it with words.
Okay, so yeah, that didn't make sense. But he's
Elegantly?
elegantly, thank you. I still don't know where I was going with it, but let's lean into it. But no, he's beautiful. He's fun. He's magical. He's romantic. And he has no self
Yeah.
beyond that.
Yeah,
he's just like the perfect guy.
Yeah, he knows wonderful places to go that are interesting and unique, and he's always telling her to look up and see other things outside of her periphery, which is kind of funny because she is like pocket sized.
So tiny.
Like you can just put her in your pocket and walk around with her. Yeah.
Itty bittiest. And he is whimsical and eccentric and, you know, works at a homeless shelter and is so giving, and we know nothing else about him.
Yep.
And even when we get to his apartment, which of course we learn it's up for sale, which is why it's empty, you get the sense that it's like that normally anyway.
Yeah. Regardless of what his apartment actually looked like when he lived in it, it is a perfect representation of him. He's kind of empty inside.
There's nothing there.
Like he is like a piece of candy. He's ultimately sweet, but doesn't give you any nutrients. Like,
well, it's interesting that you brought up earlier that there is good representation in this film, and there is, in terms of having diverse characters. But I don't think there's necessarily good representation in terms of them as fully formed humans.
right.
And that's actually interesting because we don't get to know his character at Tom Webster.
Yep.
Like really okay.
Yep.
Tom Webster we have no understanding of him. Who is he?
Yep.
What are his flaws? What, you know, she's angry at him because he keeps disappearing because he's a ghost and she doesn't know it yet.
Yeah.
But like, where's his depth?
Yeah.
You know, which we get in About a Boy. We get the mess up, the muckiness, the dirtiness, the fucked upness, all the mistakes.
Yeah, and we even get that with Bill Pullman, like all of his mistakes in While You Were Sleeping. Like Like,
and Toni Collette's mistakes, and Rachel Weisz doesn't really get to have any mistakes because she's perfect.
yeah.
And then, but yeah, no, it's the family's mistakes, and in While You're Sleeping, Peter Gallagher's piece of shit. Ashley Bartley Bacon's amazing.
Yeah.
She's perfect because of her nose and her boobs.
It's funny because out of the 3 films, this is the only one that feels like an I narrative, like a first person narrative. The other 2 very much feel like we or third person or second person. Like if we were looking at a book, like it would be like this feels like it would be a first person story, like a diary entry type of first person story. It probably has more in line in that regards with like Bridget Jones of being like a first person's fuck up, than it being a narrative that is fully fleshed with everybody else. Every other character has their thing, and I will put a little caveat to that because I think Michelle Yeoh in this film is exceptional.
She's awesome.
Like she's so funny and charming and adorable and fucking awesome, and it's
badass
and the total,
pissed off
and total opposite of what she's allowed to do in Shang-Chi, which is just an awful boring fucking film.
Yes.
Yeah. So
no, she brings so much to her character of Santa.
Yeah.
So much to her character. I love how pissed she is all the time at Emilia Clarke. I love how she's constantly calling her out. She's reminding her of who she used to be and how she could be good again. And when she starts to make a change, when Emilia Clarke's character starts to change, you know, Katerina, she's like, yeah, okay, look, I see you. I see you changing. I see you trying. And I support and respect that.
Yeah.
But also you're a piece of shit. So keep going.
Yeah.
And I love that. She's like constantly sassing her.
Yeah. There are 3 characters maybe that have really interesting character choices or beings in this film, and it's like Emma Thompson, Emilia Clarke, and Michelle Yeoh. Everybody else, they're fine. There's nothing.
There's a lot of space.
Yeah, there really isn't any space in the room for them. Like everybody else has to have a minor set of complications or choices, whereas those 3 can have like the majority of problems in the room. Like they're the ones who take up space. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you have a film that's too full of people who are taking up space emotionally, you don't really have any chance for any fun. And that's probably why the Henry Golding character is so kind of like whimsical and sprite-like. It's like, what is he supposed to do?
Right.
Like like if you give him problems as the heart, you're muddling a narrative structure. I think.
I know. I don't know. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
I love the film.
Yeah, and I also think that he does a wonderful job in it. God. Like he's super fucking charming and
he's
lovely.
Amazing.
Like but it feels
he's so freaking charming.
Yeah, but it feels like kind of like a knockoff brand of a Wong Kar-wai charmer. Like it doesn't feel like as good as a Tony Leung in Chungking Express.
But I would say he matches the charm of Bill Pullman and Sandra Bullock.
Yes, he does.
So of this genre piece, this Hollywood style holiday movie, he's like super exactly right there. Yeah. He matches the level of Sandy. He matches the level of Bill Pullman.
Yeah.
I would make out with all 3 of them.
Yeah. What's interesting is not just the fact that you would make out with all 3 of them.
All 3 of them.
But is also that it might be a performance from a bygone era, because Emilia Clarke's performance is completely different. I feel like it fits. It doesn't feel out of place, but it's different than both Emma Thompson's performance and Henry Golding's performance. Emilia Clarke has a very, very kind of modern seems like the wrong word, but it feels like a performance from a different era, whereas a different era than the broad Yugoslavian performance that Emma Thompson is giving, or the classic Henry Golding performance, which would feel totally in line with like watching Bringing Up Baby. Like I could imagine him as Cary Grant in that film. I could imagine
or as Henry Fonda and Lady Eve.
Or even Henry Fonda in fucking My Darling Clementine. Like
he's got a classic style to him.
Yeah, and it feels the performance feels performative, but not like that doesn't, I don't mean that in a negative sort of way. It feels performative in this way that you know that you're trying to get a specific response from an audience and you can get that response. It doesn't feel like, I don't mean this in a negative way. It doesn't feel grounded. Like, whereas Emilia Clarke's performance and the things she's going through feel like they come from a very grounded place.
Which is a really interesting idea, thinking of him as a ghost.
Yeah.
So maybe it was an incredibly specific choice to put him into this Hollywood era
Yeah.
performance so that it felt airy and flighty and like intangible, like you can't grab onto it.
Yeah.
Whereas Emilia Clarke is supposed to be like so stuck to the ground,
Yeah.
stuck in her sadness, stuck in the challenge of trying to live with this new heart that isn't hers and define herself as this new person.
And it actually also gives us something really wonderful to grow to for that moment that I was talking about at the end of being fantasy. Like, when she has accepted her heart and accepted who she is, she's best able to kind of match those two worlds, which also, and I feel like I'm talking myself into everybody's performances being good rather than where I was kind of started, but it also allows for Emma Thompson's character's broad performance to also live in that world where Emilia Clarke starting grounded and becoming more present in the world or more flighty in the world, and Henry Golding's character being really flighty and then disappearing because of like her acceptance of her heart. Like, all of that allows all these other performances, as minor as they are, to exist within it. And it feels, I would almost say, that the performance that everybody is aiming to give is Michelle Yeoh's performance. That she's all of those things all of the time.
As the center. She's
Yes.
like the center of the film.
Yeah. She is.
Oh, I really like that.
She's like, her performance is so grounded and flighty. Like, when she finds her boyfriend,
The German.
and she's
boy.
basically she calls him boy, and she's basically like, fuck, now I had to like sauerkraut. Who likes fermented food? Fuck. Like, there's some, but she does it in such a charming way of like reaching for the stars or jumping off the ground. It feels like her performance feels like watching a great dancer just skate around the floor. Like, it feels like it barely touches the ground, but you know all the power for their moves comes from the strength of moving with the ground.
I love that.
Yeah.
She is incredible in this film.
Yeah.
It's worth it to watch it just for her performance, but all the rest of them are good too.
Yeah.
So it's worth it to watch it for everybody.
Yeah.
As hopefully you will know, because we spoiled everything about the movie.
Yeah. You're not going to be surprised at the end of this.
What?
Like,
It was what?
He's a ghost?
Huh? Ooh,
Yeah.
awkward.
Oh,
But I do love that 2 of these films take place in London. That fills up my heart.
yeah.
Having grown up there, it's really nice to see it.
Yeah. And again, like I was saying for while you were sleeping, like, this film's stakes are not that huge. Well, let me put it this way. The stakes of being okay with who you are.
Huge.
And accepting yourself as a person that is flawed and hopeful and sometimes problematic are huge. Like, they're incredibly huge, but they're also not Avengers stakes of there's a person who's going to snap half of the world out of existence.
And
Like,
how refreshing.
yeah, and how refreshing.
We
Like,
don't need stakes like that all the time.
just the stakes of I have to accept myself as a being on this planet are fucking huge enough for every single one of us every day.
And isn't that enough? I mean, isn't that what makes it kind of like a perfect Hollywood film? Or not Hollywood, but a holiday film? Because this is kind of the reckoning. It's always this time of year that you kind of reckon with who you are, where you stand in your family, where you don't stand in your family.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean for you? And coming onto the new year,
Yeah.
who do I want to be next year?
Yeah,
How do I want to start again?
It's almost as all these films are about reflecting on the things that you've wanted and how that's going to change as you move forward. And there's something really lovely about each one of these films' reflections on who these people are. And like, the thing, I've said this before, but I love it. Like, the thing about cinema is that it always is going to be the same. The film, once it's done, is always the same. I mean, some people go back and change things, but whatever. But for the most part, the core structure of the film is the same. It's me who's going to change. Like, I'm going to come to Last Christmas in 10 years and have a different feeling of it. And that doesn't mean the film is better or worse. It just means that I've changed and now I've picked up other things. And there's something incredibly beautiful about having a view that is different than what you had yesterday. And a film that is like, hey, I'm going to reflect on who I've been and who I could be is such a wonderful mirroring of that.
It's interesting, too, from the perspective of us being filmmakers, when you're making a film. So we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, our movie Citywide, the trailer came out today. And it's really interesting, having worked on that film now, this is our third year of working on the film, where we started with a script and where we are now in our edit. We've been editing the film for about a year now, because we finished shooting right before
Pandemic.
Right before pandemic, yeah, weeks before everyone went into lockdown. We finished principal shooting. And what's really interesting is, as you edit a film and you work on it, what it meant to you when you wrote it and what it meant to us as we were starting to shoot it means something completely different to us now.
Yeah.
And it's even, if you go back, we talked about Self-Tape earlier in the series. It's our short film, Self-Tape, available in the show notes if you want to watch it. That film also meant something incredibly different to us when we made it. And over the course of time of us editing it, which was another 2-year period of us putting it together in the edit, meant something so different to us. As each year passed, we'd look at the film and we'd recut it. We'd like tinker with it until it was just perfect for us. And of course, no film is ever perfect. You always want to change a million things later. But it means something to me even now that it's out than it did when we finished editing it. Like, it's wild how, from the perspective of an audience, you can watch something and it changes. But from the perspective of the artist, it also changes. No matter what we meant when we started, it becomes its own thing. And then that evolves even further as we change.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Film is just a really interesting medium.
Well, it's what the best art does. Like, when I look at Magritte paintings now, they mean something different to me than when I saw them when I was 20. Like, it's like our ability to shift our perspective and where we are versus the item, the text that's in front of us is one of the more fortunate things that we get to have as human beings. And being able to reflect on those things in real time and then change our opinion on it is fucking awesome.
And it's why I love to encourage people to watch movies more than once and to watch them over the course of decades.
Yeah.
Because you're going to change, and the film is going to change, and your memory of it is going to change. And there's a really good podcast you guys might not know about. It's called Final Girls, and they talk about horror and they talk about feminism in horror. But it's really fun because they often will go back and do a podcast on the same film with other people. Like a few years later, they just did The Craft, and they did it. That was the first episode they did. And so they did it a second time with new people to talk about it. But it's fun to hear people say, oh, I love this film when I was a kid, or I love this film when I was in my 20s. And I've watched this film every decade. This means something so different to me now. And I just rewatched it again. I couldn't believe it. I didn't see these things. It's really important to allow time to take up space in the room when you're participating in art.
Yeah, it's an old Robert Altman quote. Like, he always argued with people that they'd never really seen his film if they'd only watched it once, because you don't listen to an album once. You don't listen to a song once. You don't go, well, I looked at that Monet for one blink and now I understand it completely. It's like there's so much artistry and craft in all these things that we're describing right now, that the idea that you get it all in one go is so foolhardy. It's really laughable.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this not too long ago, specifically. So an interesting thing about Last Christmas, we were struggling with how is there any kind of indication that he's a ghost in the cinematography? There isn't. There isn't any kind of thing that is letting us a tip of the hat to the audience that maybe all is not what it seems to be. They kind of try to fix that, I think, at the end when they do a series of shots of her where she thought she was with him and now she's alone. That Kate is without Tom, and she's changing, and those guys are kind of whistling at her. And she thought he was covering her with his coat. Yeah. Or she's ice skating and she's by herself. And you made a really interesting point, which was It's a shame they didn't use reflections. It's a shame they didn't set shots up like through the doorway when they're ice skating so that we only see her and we see her skating with herself and then we go through and there he is.
Yeah.
Right? So if we had a little tip of the hats, like she was in reflections of all those mirrors, those glasses, the storefronts she was walking by, that we saw her constantly talking with herself, and then we reveal, no, he's there.
Yeah, if the film's visual setup had been reflections and reveals, that would have been such a beautiful way to tell the same story. And if there is a fault with that film, it's that the director, I don't think, is that creative.
No, he's not that good of a director.
No.
He gets really great performances.
Yeah.
And he gets really good actors in the room together. And then that's as far as he goes.
Yeah, he gets really simple films made.
Yeah.
Like visually simple.
And they're good. They're fun.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it because I'm going to fucking watch this film for a really long time and really fucking enjoy doing it.
Yeah, and Emma Thompson is a really good writer.
Yes.
And has been from the jump.
Yeah.
She's a wonderful writer. So it's worth there again, that goes back to this idea of like a lot of people make a piece of art, a film. A lot of people are part of the process.
Yeah.
A lot of visions come together. And if you can get that last little bit, like that final touch that just brings that extra bit of magic, then you've made a masterpiece.
Yeah.
But those are so few and far between.
Not everybody does a masterpiece, and not every film needs to be.
No.
Like just having a film that's really enjoyable is really worth having.
Yeah, he doesn't get in the way of his films.
No.
And we appreciate that. But it would have been nice to have, just a little bit something.
Yeah. But all three of the films are really, really
So
good
good.
films and are really enjoyable Christmas or holiday films to watch now.
They're so full. They're so full of characters. They're so full of stories. They're so full of
life.
Yeah. And big hearts. They all have big hearts. And I appreciate that.
And at this time of year, with all the things that can be problematic with relationships or with families or with your heart, it's nice to have something that is out there that can fill a little bit of that space. And that's kind of why we chose to do these films this time.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed them.
Yeah. So now move on to some things that we stumble upon.
Austin, do you have any films that you would like to recommend to stumble upon next?
Yeah, I do have a film that I really, really love that I like to have other people stumble upon. It's this wonderful film by Oliver Assayas called Irma Vemp. He, in fact, is remaking it right now to be a television series.
Really?
Yeah. But the original one stars Maggie Cheung, who's fucking phenomenal. And it's a really interesting film about how a film gets made. And it's about a Chinese star, Maggie Cheung, who gets hired to star in a remake of a French classic. And she doesn't really speak French at all, but she speaks English and Chinese, or I think Mandarin to be specific. And she comes to the set and it's a disaster and everything's going chaotically sideways. And it's just a really compelling film. And at the core of it, there's this really wonderful relationship between Maggie Cheung and the costume designer that is just an exceptional representation of friendship and how it can kind of go sideways within the process of a film. And I love their scenes together. They're some of my favorite scenes in cinema. It is just a wonderfully down and dirty, energetic piece of art.
That sounds awesome. And I would love to watch that with you over the next few weeks.
Yeah.
So some films that I would recommend to stumble upon next. I want to stick to the holiday theme of today's podcast. And I'm going to recommend a couple different ones. Dash and Lily, which was a Netflix special.
Which I still think should be called Lily and Dash.
I do agree.
Whatever.
It's definitely Lily and Dash, not Dash and Lily. I don't know why they made that mistake.
Yeah, whatever.
Somebody was not consulting me before they titled it, which is weird.
Yeah.
But it's a really sweet teen romance miniseries. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really sweet story. It was a lot of fun. And I don't know how many episodes.
I think 6.
6?
Yeah.
So totally worth it.
Yeah.
Another stumble upon I would recommend would be a favorite of mine, Christmas in Connecticut. Definitely don't worry about the first 10 minutes. They're really boring. But then you get into Barbara Stanwyck. And knocks it out of the park.
Yeah.
She knocks it out of the park. She's amazing.
Yeah, her and Sydney Greenleaf are fucking amazing.
This is a great film.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. It's good. It's got a lot of Christmas vibes. If you're feeling like you need a tree, you need some issues with people misunderstanding who each other are. You got a lot of, it's while you were sleeping vibes of lying about things. But there are repercussions.
Yep.
And it's just really charming.
Yep.
And like I said, the first 10 minutes are super boring.
Yeah.
But once you get through that, it's great.
Yeah.
The whole rest of it is awesome.
Yeah, eat your popcorn loudly during the first 10 minutes because you don't really need to know any of the narrative things that are happening. Just as soon as she shows up, as soon as Barbara Stanwyck shows up, and you'll know when she shows up if you don't know who she is because you're like, that's the badass. Then you can choose softer.
Yeah, and you choose softer. And while there's definitely some things that don't age well, like she is a feminist.
Yep.
She's a working woman. She's lying about a bunch of things. She's fantastic, and she's very feminist.
Yeah.
I love it. So I would recommend Christmas in Connecticut and Dash and Lily. And I have one more recommendation, which is going to be our next episode. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend The Apartment.
Yes.
With Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. Definitely watch this film.
Yeah, it is the best. It is the best holiday film for me. Like it covers all of the bases. It covers all the hope and sadness and confusion and wonderfulness of being, in this season.
Yeah.
And Billy Wilder, who's the director of it, he had a run of films that are almost incomparable for any other filmmaker. And this is, to me, the highlight of all those films.
Yeah. You want a masterpiece?
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah.
So, on that note,
thank you very much for listening and spending some time with us this afternoon, evening, or really early in the morning. I don't know when you're listening.
No, we don't.
But I can enjoy the time with you, I guess.
Well, we had fun.
Yes.
And we hope you do.
Yeah.
And happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.